repeat myself. I want to welcome you all to this third session on the extraordinary life of Abdu'l-Bahá. And this is Violetta Zane's third presentation on the central figures of the faith that she has been doing in collaboration with the Clearwater Bahá'ís, with the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, located in Eloy, Arizona, founded by Marguerite Sears in honor of her husband, Hand of the Cause William Sears, and Hand of the Cause General Alai. I'll talk about that at the end of the program. And then the third institution is the one that I'm coming from, which is the Firm Foundation Academy in Pike, California, in the Sierra Nevada. So Violetta has been doing something really quite extraordinary. She's pioneering a new form of historical presentation on, as far as I know, on any Baha'i theme. I don't think it's ever been done before. And so she's presented on the Bab, on Baha'u'llah, and now on Abdu'l-Bahá. And this will be her third session. And the previous two sessions have been recorded, and they are on some sort of a website that she can give you the information.
Some sort of a website. I'm sorry, are you talking about my chronologies?
Yes, I'm talking about your...
They're on the Utterance Project. They're not on some sort of website. They're on the Utterance Project website.
But they're on the Utterance, and I believe I think they're also Clearwater has a repository as well, but
only on the Utterance Project.
So do you all know where to find the Utterance Project?
I'll just put it in the Zoom chat. You can keep going and we can start.
Yes. So we're going to there's a huge amount of material that Violetta wants to share with all of us. So I'm going to keep this introduction every morning, or whatever time it is for you. I'll keep it very brief so that she has the maximum amount of time. Okay. And then, the session will go pretty close to 2 hours, and then there will be a time for questions and answers at the end. All right. That won't be recorded, by the way. We're just going to record the presentation. So welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. And Violetta, you are on.
Okay. Are you seeing my share screen?
No, we lost the share screen, Violetta.
Okay. Not working. So I apologize. It was working perfectly until we started. So let me just readjust.
So while you're doing that, Violetta, I just wanted to reiterate that the videos, the previous day 1 and day 2 of this particular series, the Extraordinary Life of Abdu'l-Bahá, you can find those on both the Clearwater Baha'i and the Facebook and YouTube. So you can find those and all the previous sessions that Violetta has done as well. And we will at some point be making those videos available to the other institutions, the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, as well as Firm Foundation Academy. Are we closer to getting your screen back, Violetta?
I think so.
Wonderful. Okay. We see it now.
Okay, so let me just... Okay, that's good. And this you can see?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so yesterday Yesterday, we finished with the story of Badi and his martyrdom. And today we are starting with a very lovely piece of history. And I'm referring to the soldiers and officers of the barracks and the influence of Abdu'l-Bahá's amazing character. So between 1868 and 1870, the time that the Holy Family is in the most great prison, the Abdu'l-Bahá's character affected many people, including the prison guards. Here we have Colonel Ahmad-i-Jarrah, commander of the guard during Baha'u'llah's imprisonment in the barracks. He later became a believer. And this photograph is from Mr. Taherzadeh's Revelation of Baha'u'llah, Volume 3. The soldiers and officers at the barracks carry out the Sultan's edict very strictly to the letter of the word at first, confining Baha'u'llah, the Holy Family, and the exiles to solitary life imprisonment and barring them from meeting anyone. Gradually, however, they are affected by Baha'u'llah's majesty, the loftiness of his teachings, and his exalted character. Abdu'l-Bahá's loving disposition, his divine qualities, his stainless character, his saintly virtues impress the barrack guards. The guards and officers increasingly turn to the master for guidance, and one of them, Colonel Ahmad-i-Jarrah, who were very lucky to have his picture, the commander of the guard, eventually becomes a Baha'i. Eventually, they begin to relax the restrictions imposed on the prisoners and the exiles, and they become more lenient. Eventually, the exiles are given rooms in various parts of the barracks. Some now serve as cooks, cleaners, water carriers, and errand runners. Abdu'l-Bahá hires an Egyptian basket weaver to teach some of the prisoners how to weave rush mats. The barracks remain a hardship, but through the guidance and leadership of Abdu'l-Bahá, the exiles' daily lives become organized, systematized, in a way that they make the best out of the situation they find themselves in. Their greatest joy, of course, is to be in the presence of Baha'u'llah when he visits them in their quarters, and when they can offer him the little food or refreshments they've saved up to offer him. But then tragedy strikes. On the 22nd of June, 1870, Mirza Mehdi, the youngest son of Baha'u'llah, and Munirih Khanum. This is a photograph of Mirza Mehdi. Mirza Mehdi was the essence of gentleness and purity. He's born in 1849 in Tehran in the turmoil of the momentous year that saw the martyrdom of countless Baha'is in the uprisings of Mazindaran, Nayriz, Zanjan, 7 martyrs of Tehran, and the martyrdom of the Bab. When Baha'u'llah is exiled to Baghdad with his family, the 3-year-old Mirza Mehdi is too young and too fragile to survive the arduous winter journey over the mountains into Iraq, and he is separated from his family for 7 years, finally reunited with them in 1858, 2 years after Baha'u'llah has returned from Sulaymaniyah at the age of 10. As a youth, Mirza Mehdi is so pure that he becomes magnetized by the forces of Baha'u'llah's revelation, and he serves his father every moment of his young life, and acting as his amanuensis, copying innumerable tablets in his distinguished and rapid handwriting, of which we still have many samples in the Baha'i World Center. Mirza Mehdi is a noble, pious, and spiritual young man, whom Baha'u'llah titled Ghusnalul Athar, the purest branch. He leads a pure and spiritual life, and he is a pillar of strength in the Baha'i community, often sitting with the believers and reading from the writings of Baha'u'llah, and in the words of Shoghi Effendi, quote, teaching them the lessons of courtesy and patience, of dignity and radiant submission to the will of God. In 1870, Mirza Mehdi is 21 years old, and he closely resembles Abdu'l-Bahá, although slightly taller than him and without a beard. And he displays divine spiritual qualities and an exquisite character. In the most great prison, Mirza Mehdi lives close to Baha'u'llah, entering his presence in the afternoons to serve as his amanuensis and devoting a great deal of his time to prayer and meditation. On the 22nd of June, 1870, the fall. This painting from 1839 shows a view of Haifa from the north, that is, from Akká, similar to the kind of view that Mirza Mehdi would have had from the top of the barracks, looking across the bay to Haifa. You can see the beautiful Mount Carmel profiled in this painting. On the 22nd of June, 1870, the 22-year-old Mirza Mehdi, the purest branch and Abdu'l-Bahá's younger brother by 4 years, goes to the rooftop of the citadel in the evening in order to pray and meditate. The view from the roof is beautiful. The plains of Akká spread down with majestic Mount Harmon to the north, and behind him, across from the bay, Haifa to the south, with a silhouette of Mount Carmel in the distance against the blue Mediterranean. Mirza Mehdi paces up and down the roof, deep in meditation and prayer, and tragically, that day does not remember to count his steps as he usually does in order to avoid an open skylight in the roof. He falls and lands on crates which pierce his chest. The sound of his fall is catastrophic, and the rush of the Baha'i exiles towards Mirza Mehdi pull Baha'u'llah from his room. On the 23rd of June, 1870, the martyrdom of Mirza Mehdi. In this photograph, you see a renovated floor of the barracks, but the stone where the wooden crates were, which pierced Mirza Mehdi's chest, those stones were not renovated. And from the light above, you see the open skylight through which he fell. Mirza Mehdi, in immense pain, remains attentive to the visitors who crowd by his bedside, and even expresses discomfort to one of the believers at having to receive them while he is lying down in bed, dying. Witnesses will recall Baha'u'llah lamenting out loud, "Mehdi, oh Mehdi." Everyone is grief-stricken. No one more than Asya Khanum, his mother. Abdu'l-Bahá enters the presence of Baha'u'llah with tearful eyes, prostrates himself at his Holy Father's feet, and begs for his young brother's life and for his healing. Baha'u'llah reportedly responds to Abdu'l-Bahá, "Oh, my greatest branch, leave him in the hands of his God." Baha'u'llah then dismisses everyone and stays by his youngest son's side for an entire hour. These are the words of Adib Taherzadeh, and I will quote them as he wrote them because they are beautiful. Although no one knows what took place in that precious hour between the lover and the beloved, we can be sure that this son of Baha'u'llah, whose devotion and love to the cause of his father knew no bounds, must have been exhilarated by the outpourings of bounty and love from his Lord. "23rd of June, 1870, Mirza Mehdi's dying wish." This is a photograph of Abdu'l-Bahá on the right with a mustache and beard, Mirza Mehdi on the left, beardless. And you see such a strong resemblance, especially in the eyes. This photograph was taken 2 years before his martyrdom. Agha Husseini Ashchi, if you remember from yesterday, he was the one whom Abdu'l-Bahá chastised in front of the governor a few months earlier. Agha Husseini Ashchi recalls the last conversation between Baha'u'llah and his beloved son. Baha'u'llah asked him, Agha, what do you wish? Tell me. To which his son replied, I wish the people of Baha to be able to attain your presence. And so shall it be, Baha'u'llah said. God will grant your wish. Mirza Mehdi dies the next day, 23rd of June, 1870. About his death and sacrifice, Shoghi Effendi writes in God Passes By. In a highly significant prayer revealed by Baha'u'llah in memory of his son, a prayer that exalts his death to the rank of those great acts of atonement associated with Abraham's intended sacrifice of his son, with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, we read the following. These are Baha'u'llah's words. I have, O my Lord, offered up that which thou hast given me, that thy servants may be quickened, and all that dwell on earth be united. And likewise, these prophetic words addressed to his martyred son, Mirza Mehdi. Thou art the trust of God and his treasure in this land. Ere long will God reveal through thee that which he hath desired. June 23rd, 1870. Abdu'l-Bahá paces in front of the tent where his brother's body is being washed. This is the courtyard of the barracks around 1920. The water pool is in the center. It is most probably in this courtyard that a tent was pitching for the washing of the martyred son of Baha'u'llah and Munirih Khanum. Sheikh Mahmud requests from Abdu'l-Bahá the honor of washing and shrouding the body of the purest branch, so that the soldiers of the barracks may not lay a hand on his holy trust. Abdu'l-Bahá consents, and a tent is pitched in the yard underneath which the body of the martyred Mirza Mehdi is prepared for burial. During this time, Abdu'l-Bahá is so stricken by the loss, so sudden, of his younger brother that his face is imprinted with grief. He paces outside the tent where the body of his brother lies. On the left here, you see a 1930s photograph of the section of the Muslim cemetery of Akká, with a row of graves that includes that of Mirza Mehdi. And on the right is the original headstone of Mirza Mehdi's grave in the cemetery on the left, which was removed and kept, I imagine, after his remains were moved to Mount Carmel. 24th of June, 1879, the funeral of Mirza Mehdi and the earthquake. On the 24th of June, 1870, in the afternoon, Mirza Mehdi's martyred body is placed in a casket, and as the sounds of weeping and lamentation rose, it is carried out to the most great prison on the shoulders of barrack guards in a serene and majestic funeral procession, joined by the notables of Akká. Baha'u'llah's youngest son was laid to rest in a Muslim cemetery beyond the city walls, near the shrine of Nabi Salih. After Mirza Mehdi's funeral at 5 p.m. on June 24th, 1870, an earthquake hit Palestine. The tremors lasted 3 minutes and were felt around Palestine, from Jerusalem to Akká, Nazareth, and Gaza. Nabil, Sayyid Mehdi Idahaji, and Nabili Kaini, Nabili Akbar, were in Nazareth when the earth shook, and they said people were frightened. Baha'u'llah himself confirms the earthquake following Mirza Mehdi's burial, and a tablet of visitation he revealed for the purest branch. Addressing Mirza Mehdi, Baha'u'llah says, when thou wast laid to rest in the earth itself trembled in its longing to meet thee. Between 1870 and 1868 and 1870, Abdu'l-Bahá and the Mufti of Akká, Part 1. This is a two-part story. The first part is now, and the second part comes after they leave the barracks. This is a street in Bethlehem in the 1880s. I love this photograph, and I think that at least some of the streets of Akká would have resembled this. And this was at the time that Baha'u'llah was living in Ottoman Palestine. So Abdu'l-Bahá and the Mufti of Akká, Part 1. A Mufti is a highly respected Islamic scholar and jurist. In the 19th century, all these Muslim countries we are speaking about, Muftis are extremely important figures in Islamic society. One day, Sheikh Ali Miri, the Mufti of Akká, a somewhat fanatical man, expresses to Abdu'l-Bahá his desire to meet Baha'u'llah, as he has some questions he would like answers to. At this time, Baha'u'llah does not grant interviews in order to comply with the Sultan's edict. Eventually, after Abdu'l-Bahá pleads the Mufti's case, Baha'u'llah grants permission for an audience. Abdu'l-Bahá stands by the door, and the Mufti takes his seat and asks his questions. Baha'u'llah then begins revealing. And it is not him, but the tongue of grandeur, ushering a flow of utterance. Seeing that the Mufti is about to speak while Baha'u'llah is revealing, Abdu'l-Bahá sends him a commanding signal that Baha'u'llah is not to be interrupted when he is in a state of revelation. When this interview is concluded, Abdu'l-Bahá walks a discontented Mufti back to the prison gate. This man, used to the shopkeepers kissing his hands when he walks through the bazaar of Akká, and his pride is hurt at having been ordered to keep silent. Gradually, however, as he spends more time with Abdu'l-Bahá, the Mufti begins to see Abdu'l-Bahá's learning and knowledge are so immense that his own are but a drop compared to Abdu'l-Bahá's. Abdu'l-Bahá possessed of such a vast ocean of innate knowledge, the Mufti cannot but notice his superiority in all things. The Mufti's attitude changes. In the bazaars where he used to have his hand kissed, he now walks a few steps behind Abdu'l-Bahá. Part 2 in a little bit. October 1870. The barracks are requisitioned and the Holy Family moves into Akká. This is a colorized photograph of pre-1908 of the Guard Field Artillery in the Ottoman Army from an Ottoman Uniforms website. The movement of troops within the Ottoman Empire forces the authorities of Akká to requisition the barracks for military use. The gates, which had been bolted shut behind the exiles on August 31st, 1868, are now flung open, and the believers are scattered in various accommodations within the Akká city walls. The dying wish of Mirza Mehdi is about to be fulfilled. This is the section in Akká between 1870, when the Holy Family leaves the Most Great Prison, and 1877, when Baha'u'llah leaves the city gate for the first time in 9 years for Mazra. Here is a map of Akká. I'm going to extend the sharing a tiny little bit to show you the bottom of this. Here you see in black the citadel and the barracks. And on the public bath is the one that Abdu'l-Bahá had renovated. And then you have all the houses that Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá lived in Akká, on the bottom and the side of the city. Start at the bottom with the brown place mark, the houses of Malik and Khavam, then the house of Rabieh, the house of Udi Khamar, the house of Abud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses. So from about 1870 onwards, Abdu'l-Bahá and the first pilgrim house. This is an engraving of the Khani Avamid, the Inn of the Pillars. You notice the distinctive clock tower that we now see is was not present in the 19th century. It's famous for its pillars. When Baha'u'llah and the Holy Family are moved from one house to another, most of the exiles and Abdu'l-Bahá are lodged in the Khan-i Avamid, an ancient caravanserai, also known as the Inn of the Pillars. Merci, Maman. Close to the sea. And what I mean by close to the sea is you see here the Khani Avamid in dark purple, right next to the sea gate where Baha'u'llah and the Holy Family disembarked and arrived and entered Akká. The Khani Avamid has its back to the sea. That's what I mean. Mirza Musa and his family live in a house that is inside the Inn of the Pillars, the Khani Avamid. Abdu'l-Bahá lives in a room which doubles as the first pilgrim house in Baha'i history. Pilgrims arriving from Persia are first received by Abdu'l-Bahá in this room. The master sees to it that the pilgrims are ready to meet Baha'u'llah in every sense of the word, physically as well as spiritually. So he ensures that they have a change of clothes, and he exemplifies such courtesy, humility, and utter selflessness that they unconsciously absorb his example. During his years in Akká, Abdu'l-Bahá is said to regularly distribute alms to the poor, and on feast days, Abdu'l-Bahá honors the children of Akká and offers them refreshments, including sherbet, placed in the basin of the caravanserai. Eminent Baha'is will pass through the gates of the Khani Avamid through the years, such as Mishkin Khalam, Zainul Mukharrabin, and Haji Mirza Haydar Ali. Sometime between 1871 and 1873, I'm going to regale you with a terrifying description of Abdu'l-Bahā's room in the Khani Avamid, and then tonight you will go and you will thank Baha'u'llah that your room is not like this. This is the Khani Avamid, another view with children in the foreground. The rooms in the Khani Avamid are filthy and damp. Abdu'l-Bahá sells a gift he had received in Baghdad and uses the money to begin repairing the exiles' rooms, of course, typically in his fashion, leaving his room for last to renovate. Predictably, the money runs out before he renovates his room and before he can repair his quarters, which boast an earthen floor, damp walls with grass growing on the walls, a leaking roof, and an extremely unfortunate and very advanced flea infestation. So Abdu'l-Bahā's bed during this time is a simple straw mat on the dirt ground and a sheepskin as a cover to cover himself. Because the flea infestation in his room is so severe, the only way to defeat the fleas and get at least a couple hours of night's sleep is for Abdu'l-Bahá to flip himself over, to flip the sheepskin over. So the sheepskin is like a pancake, you know, that you flip over. So Abdu'l-Bahá lying and he flips over the sheepskin. So he disrupts the fleas for a little bit. And then while the fleas are gathering again, he has time to sleep for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then he has to flip the sheepskin over again. He does this 8 or 10 times a night to disrupt the little vermin. Abdu'l-Bahá leaves the Khan Avamid at some point during Baha'u'llah's residence in the house of Munirih Khanum, because at the time, the activities of the covenant breakers are such that Abdu'l-Bahá desires to stay close to Baha'u'llah. So now we're going to go back in time. I know, this is not very chronological, but I was inspired to do it this way. So we're going to go back slightly a little bit, and we're going to go through the houses of Baha'u'llah before Abdu'l-Bahá joins them in the house of Munirih Khanum. So during this whole time when Baha'u'llah is changing houses, Abdu'l-Bahá is in his lovely 5-star room in the Khan Avamid with the blanket and the fleas and the grass on the walls and the earthen floor and the leaky roof and the money that ran out before he could renovate it. But this is now where the Holy Family is leaving, and they move 4 houses before Abdu'l-Bahá joins them. This is the first one. It's the house of Malik. This is an aerial photograph of Akká. The first house that Baha'u'llah occupies for 3 months, only 3 months, when he leaves in November 1870, the most great prison, is the house of Malik in the west of Akká. So see here, it would be somewhere here in the southwest, according to the map. I'm drawing a generous circle here, because this here is the house of Abud and this is the house of Munirih Khanum. So these first 2 houses are in the southwest, right here. This is the former Templar quarter near the churches of St. George and St. Andrew. It's a Christian neighborhood. So between February and May 1871, Baha'u'llah's second house in Akká is the house of Mansur Khavam. And you have it indicated here on the bottom, very bottom there. The authorities moved the Holy Family to the house of Khavam across a narrow lane from the house of Malik. So the house of Malik and the house of Khavam are right across from each other. And still in the Christian southwestern part of Akká. Now, between May and September 1871, Baha'u'llah's third house in Akká and the Holy Family is the house of Rabi'eh, a little bit to the northwest of the houses of Malik and Khavam. The Holy Family moves for a third time, this time into the Muslim quarter of Akká, once the quarter of the merchants of Pisa during the Crusades. They move into the house of Rabi'eh, a charcoal maker, adjacent to a very tiny shrine of a warrior of Salat al-Din, and they only stay 4 months in this house. Now we come to an interesting part of the story, because they move into a house where they're going to stay for 2 years, the house of Munirih Khanum. This is a beautiful period picture almost of the house of Munirih Khanum. It's very interesting to have this photograph, because now there are always cars parked nearby and telephone poles. And so this is just a precious photograph to have. And now you see where it's located. I'm just going to show you this briefly. It's the red dot up here, and it's located due north of the last house they lived in, of the charcoal maker's house. I don't know if I showed that long enough. There you go. Due north. Okay, so finally, the Baha'is discover an empty house. Munirih Khanum, a wealthy Christian merchant, has vacated his small townhouse in order to move to a veritable palace at the Garden of Bahji, Delight, 2 kilometers northeast of the city of Akká. The Holy Family moves into the house of Munirih Khanum, into the heart of the Christian community of Akká. But the house is much too small for their needs. At one point, 13 people are forced to share 1 room. One of the believers some of the believers at this point moved to the Khan Avamid. When Baha'u'llah enters the house of Udi Khamar, the crisis with the covenant breakers reaches a climax. One of the covenant breakers, Baha'u'llah had expelled from the community for his reprehensible behavior, succeeds in poisoning the minds of the people of Akká against Baha'u'llah through a campaign of vicious lies and calumnies. Baha'u'llah withdraws further away from the grieved believers, and Abdu'l-Bahá at this point rejoins the family, leaves the Khan Avamid to be by Baha'u'llah's side. Before we get into grievous matters, we're going to tell you a little story about Abdu'l-Bahá and the coal thief sometime after 1870. And here is a coal merchant in Georgia in 1906, 30 years after the story below, but his donkey is loaded with charcoal. Look at that beautiful donkey. Abdu'l-Bahá, the Bahá'ís in Akká, obviously they need fuel. So Abdu'l-Bahá, after obtaining permission, buys a camel load of charcoal, which is then sent to Akká. The camel driver is stopped by a Christian merchant who admires the really nice quality of this charcoal that Abdu'l-Bahá has bought, much better than the charcoal he has delivered. So he simply takes it without offering any compensation to the Bahá'ís. The theft is reported to Abdu'l-Bahá, who visits the merchant's shop and stands inside his door unnoticed, ignored. Abdu'l-Bahá enters the shop and sits inside. The merchant continues to pay him no attention, and Abdu'l-Bahá sits in silence for 3 hours. When every last customer has gone and Abdu'l-Bahá is now the only person left in the shop, the merchant and the master finally have the conversation. Are you one of those prisoners here? Abdu'l-Bahá assents. What have you done that you're imprisoned? Abdu'l-Bahá answers, since you ask me, I will tell you. We have done nothing. We are persecuted as Christ was persecuted. What do you know of Christ? To this question, Abdu'l-Bahá responds so eloquently. The merchant perceives that not only does Abdu'l-Bahá know of Jesus Christ, but he is extremely intimately familiar with the Bible and knows more than he even does. The merchant begins asking Abdu'l-Bahá questions about the Bible and is absolutely fascinated with Abdu'l-Bahā's explanations, which he has never before encountered, obviously, because he's hearing about Jesus Christ from the center of the covenant, the future center of the covenant, the son of a manifestation of God. At length, the merchant invites Abdu'l-Bahá to sit beside him, and they continue talking for 2 hours. At the end, very pleased with his afternoon, the merchant confides, very pleased with having made Abdu'l-Bahá wait for 5 hours. The merchant confides, the coal is gone. I cannot return it to you, but here is the money. The merchant escorts Abdu'l-Bahá to the door and down into the street with the greatest of respect. This encounter is the beginning of a deep friendship between the two men and between their two families. And I'm just going to stop here and go completely off script. There were 10,000 people at Abdu'l-Bahā's funeral. And every single person that gave tributes at his funeral were not Baha'i. They were Christian, they were Jewish, they were Druze, they were Muslim, they were poets, they were clerics. Baha'is didn't say a word. Why? Because for 40 years, Abdu'l-Bahá lived in Akká, and he had interactions like this, not once a day, constantly. Everybody knew him. That is how you get 10,000 people at a funeral. And all of them saw in him Abbas Effendi, their father, their grandfather, their uncle, their refuge. Oh, you've been wanting this one, haven't you? This is 1870, Abdu'l-Bahá and the Mufti of Akká, Part 2. I promised you. Keep my promises. This is the city of Akká around 1919. Abdu'l-Bahá and the Mufti of Akká, Part 2. When Baha'u'llah moves out of the barracks and into Akká, Sheikh Ali Miri, the Mufti of Akká, regularly visits the visitor's room in the outer apartment of the house and sits at Abdu'l-Bahā's feet. He diligently carries out every task he is entrusted with. His devotion to Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá only deepens with time. He becomes so enkindled that one day he confides in Abdu'l-Bahá that each time he stands to pray, the majestic figure of Baha'u'llah appears before him. Abdu'l-Bahá generously showers his attention and favors upon the Mufti, as he does with other notables of Akká. It is not a stretch to say that in the mid to late 1870s, the government of Akká almost revolves around the person of Abdu'l-Bahá. All the officials long to receive his blessings and favors. The fortunes of the Bahá'ís sees a complete reversal from abasement into honor, due entirely to the stainless character, the spiritual qualities, the person of Abdu'l-Bahá, and the prestige that he alone carries. Now for a fascinating little vignette of Baha'i history. After 1870, the conversation with the Russian consul in Astarabad. This is a beautiful painting by Franz Roubaud, The Siege of Sebastopol, 1853-1854, which is the subject of this vignette below. Agha Muhammad Rahim is a merchant in Isfahan. After he becomes a Baha'i, his family, particularly his father, make his life unbearable, and he pioneers to Ishqabad. He finds himself now in Astarabad, which is now Gorgan, Iran, a city halfway between Tehran and Ishqabad, Turkmenistan. In Astarabad, now Gorgan, he meets with the Russian consul, who asks him questions about the faith. One night, the consul asks him, "In the tablet of Baha'u'llah, addressed to the Tsar of Russia, it states, 'We verily have heard the thing for which thou didst supplicate thy Lord.' Now, what had the Tsar supplicated in prayer?" Absolutely unsure how to respond to this question, Agha Muhammad Rahim begins nonetheless to answer. "To me, the rulers of the various nations desire nothing from God except assistance in defeating the enemy and conquering new lands. And inasmuch as the army of Russia had been defeated in the Battle of Sebastopol," painting here, "the Tsar in his prayers had expressed the wish to overcome the Ottoman Empire. Best he could do." Once he's replied, Agha Muhammad Rahim begins to have doubts about his answer. Oh my God, did I say the right thing? Anyway, doubts and doubts and doubts. And at long last, after arriving in Akká, he proceeds to the Khan Avamid. Abdu'l-Bahá visits him and inquires about his conversation with the Russian consul. Agha Muhammad Rahim expresses his concern regarding the answer he gave, but Abdu'l-Bahá reassures him with these words. "One day, the Blessed Beauty observed, at this very moment, the tablet to the Tsar of Russia is being read. The consul is asking one of the friends the nature of the request of the Tsar, and he receives the correct answer. His name is Agha Muhammad Rahim Isfahani." Excuse me 1 second. I am actually going to show you the next vignette. I'm going to let you read a little bit about this. You can lean in and try to make out some words of this. This is in April 1871, the very first Western article ever written about Baha'u'llah. And then while I do this, I'm going to send the link. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Someone is trying to get in. Just panicking. Thank you very much. Let's see. So, as I said, this in April 1871 is the first Western article about Baha'u'llah. It's called The Babs of Persia. It's a letter to the editor of the Times, printed in the Times, London, October 5th, 1871, on page 8, by Dr. Thomas Chaplin. This is, according to Dr. Mujan Momen, the first extended commentary on Baha'u'llah in Western newspapers. The only Westerner who will publish an account of meeting Baha'u'llah is Edward Granville Brown, an important distinction because Edward Granville Brown is not the only Westerner to meet Baha'u'llah. I've counted at least 3 or 4 Westerners that Baha'u'llah met in his lifetime, including Edward Granville Brown. Dr. Brown is the only one who will write so eloquently about meeting Baha'u'llah and bring back a message from Baha'u'llah. This is someone who was working in the Holy Land. Now, this is a very long article. I'll just show you how long it is. Very long. By Dr. Chaplin, MD. So anyway, you can download this and expand it and read it at your convenience on the, I'll send the link today. Dr. Chaplin was working, I think, in Jerusalem in a clinic, and he wanted to visit Baha'u'llah, but instead he had a 2-hour interview with Abdu'l-Bahá in April 1871. So April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So 6 months before the article is published. So the article, besides the fact that Dr. Chaplin called Baha'is the Babs throughout, is actually interesting because it affords a portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá that's really, really unique, because it's he does draw a beautiful pen portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá, and I'm going to read that because I think it's really wonderful that to have the perspective of a Westerner who is not a Baha'i looking at Abdu'l-Bahá, the son of a manifestation of God, and describing him physically. Very, very interesting. So this is how this Westerner saw. I'm just going to read the article. I'm going to pronounce it the way he writes it too, because it's kind of funny. Baha'u'llah himself does not readily concede an interview to strangers, and receives only such as is desirous of obtaining from him instruction in religious truth. We were received by his son, who is apparently about 30 years of age. That's fair. It's about almost right. And has a fine intellectual countenance, with black hair and beard, and that sallow, melancholic look, which distinguishes nearly all Persians of the intelligent and religious class. Oh my God. Yeah, I told you it was interesting. I didn't say it was great. He was dressed in a robe of white flannel, with a cap of the same material and a small white turban. Over his shoulders was thrown a brown cloth aba'i. He had a remarkably earnest, almost solemn manner, spoke excellent Arabic fluently, and showed a minute and accurate knowledge of the Old and New Testaments. We've twice now people saying that he was very familiar with the Bible, so it's really wonderful. As well as an acquaintance with the history of religious thought in Europe. Now, how? He's a prisoner in Akká, in the bottom of the Ottoman Empire. How does Abdu'l-Bahá has intimate acquaintance with the history of religious thought in Europe? Sit with that. Our interview lasted 2 hours, during the whole of which time an animated conversation was maintained. From all that I could learn, These people lead pure and harmless lives and hold no political opinions which could render them dangerous. That's probably the most important thing in that article. So, after pleasant things, unpleasant ones. 22nd of January, 1872, 3 covenant breakers are murdered and Abdu'l-Bahá is chained. This is the governorate in Akká, looking across to the room where Baha'u'llah was interrogated on the bottom floor there, those windows. In 1871, Baha'u'llah reveals the fire tablet. We all know the fire tablet. If someone doesn't, please put the question in the chat and someone will give you a link to it. The fire tablet is revealed in rhyming verse, and I really encourage you to go to the Utterance Project, do a search for fire tablet and listen to the original Arabic. You will see it is a poem. It is a conversation that rhymes like a poem between Baha'u'llah and God about immense trials and tribulations. In an untranslated tablet revealed shortly thereafter, Baha'u'llah clearly prophesies the appearance of a great affliction and describes the ocean of tribulation, surging in billowing waves surrounding the ark of the cause of God. 1 year later, Baha'u'llah's prophecy is realized. Late in the afternoon of January 22nd, 1872, 7 misguided Baha'is decide to protect Baha'u'llah in the worst manner possible and rid Akká forever of the scheming of the 3 covenant breakers by committing murder. They shoot the 3 covenant breakers who were living in a house across from the governorate's office, the worst possible place. It's like killing 3 people that live right across from the town hall. Pandemonium ensues after the sound of the gunshots combined with the yelling and shouting that draw Salih Pasha, the governor, out of his house. The population, young and old, rich and poor, notables and workers, clerics and government officers, troublemakers, Salih Pasha and the chief of police and the troops, this entire mob, the whole city basically, set out towards the house of Baha'u'llah with sticks and stones, rifles and swords, and anything they can put their hands on. Baha'u'llah is absorbed in revelation when the crowd assembles outside of the house. An hour after the arrest, an hour after sunset, an army officer entered the house and requests Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Bahá, and 3 other Baha'is to accompany him to the governorate. Abdu'l-Bahá goes to present the request to Baha'u'llah, who leaves the house led by a man carrying a lantern, which means night has just fallen. Baha'u'llah's indignation knows no bounds. Of everyone assembled, the governor, the mayor, the chief of police, all these people, Baha'u'llah is the one that is the most upset about what just happened. And he will later reveal tablets testifying to the depths of his emotion regarding this utterly tragic event. At the governorate, Baha'u'llah takes a seat at the front of the room, this room. Asked if he believes it is meet for his men to commit such a heinous crime, Baha'u'llah replies, "Should a soldier under your command break a rule, would you be held responsible and punished for it?" Between the 22nd and the 25th of January, 1872, Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá are imprisoned. You see here in the photograph to the right, you see the Khani Khavirdi, the caravanserai in Akká, where Baha'u'llah was kept in custody for 1 night during the interrogation. It is adjacent to the Liman, the prison, where Baha'u'llah was taken, where Abdu'l-Bahá was taken. Sorry, I just need a break. 4 hours after sunset on the 22nd of January, 1872, for that time of year, 4 hours after sunset in Akká would have been around 9 p.m. So around 9 p.m., 4 hours after sunset on January 22nd, 1872, Baha'u'llah and his son Mirza Muhammad Ali are moved to a room above the Khani Shavirdi, this image you see here, the building you see in the image here. The eastern wing of the Khani Shavirdi is adjacent to the prison, the Liman, where Abdu'l-Bahá is taken and shackled. The next day, Baha'u'llah is transferred to a better room in the same neighborhood for 2 more nights, still under arrest. Abdu'l-Bahá, however, in the meantime, is led to the Liman, the prison, and put in chains for the first night. Officials come to the Liman demanding keys from Abdu'l-Bahá because they intend to search the house of Udi Khamar. And Abdu'l-Bahá does something that he had done 4 years prior when they arrived. He refuses because the women are in the house alone, and he's not about to let strangers, especially military men, into the house with his saintly mother and sister. So he insists on coming with them. The officials agree, and they take Abdu'l-Bahá, still shackled in chains, through the streets of Akká at basically 10 p.m. at night. The prison where Abdu'l-Bahá is held is in the northeastern corner of Akká, and the house where Munirih Khanum and Bahá'ís Khanum are is in the southwestern side of the city. So he has to basically cross Akká in chains, 500 meters each way, so a full kilometer, manacled. When they reach the house, Abdu'l-Bahá tries to gather his Abba to hide the chains from his mother and sister. But how can you hide chains? Because they're going to make noise and they're going to make you bend over. You know, they're heavy and they're metal, and he's shackled. So he probably has them in his hands and feet. Anyway. But of course, Munirih Khanum sees the chains and she weeps bitterly. The next day, Abdu'l-Bahá is permitted to join Baha'u'llah. 25 Baha'is are shackled and imprisoned elsewhere in the city. Salih Pasha, who has cabled all the events to Subhi Pasha, the valley of Syria, the whole region, is reprimanded for the way that he has dared to treat Baha'u'llah. Freed in person by Salih Pasha on the afternoon of January 25th, 1872, Baha'u'llah has now contracted a slight fever, and he states that the authorities, especially Salih Pasha, have not acted according to the edicts of God. As Baha'u'llah rises to return home, the men stand up and humbly apologize. The 7 murderers will remain in the prison of the Liman for 7 years. The other Baha'is are imprisoned for the next 6 months and will be released by another more just governor of Akká. The Holy Family's next door neighbor, Ilyas Aboud, the nephew of Udi Khamar, but Ilyas Aboud, who will later sell them his house, at this point, though, he is completely terrified of the Persians next door, and he reinforces his home and barricades his home against any access from the house of Udi Khamar. These are the powerful words of Baha'u'llah regarding the murder of the 3 Azalis, 3 covenant breakers, and the behavior of the Baha'is. My captivity cannot harm me. That which can harm me is the conduct of those who profess to love me, who claim to be related to me, and yet perpetrate what causeth my heart and my pen to groan. My captivity can bring on me no shame. Nay, by my life it conferreth on me glory. That which can make me ashamed is the conduct of such of my followers as profess to love me, yet in fact follow the evil one. I'm a nice person, and we're going to end with something very joyful today. We're going to talk about the wedding of Abdu'l-Bahá and Munirih Khanum. Beginning in 1871, the dream of Baha'u'llah. This is an engraving of Isfahan in 1851, 4 years after Munirih Khanum is born there in 1847. Now, Munirih Khanum's birth is a miracle because her parents could not conceive. And so they were at a dinner when the Bab was present in Isfahan. And someone mentioned to the Bab that they could not conceive. And the Bab gave them some food from his plate and said that they both should eat from his plate. And Munirih Khanum was born 9 months later. Around 1870, 1871, the future wife of Abdu'l-Bahá, Munirih Khanum, is just 25 years old. She's born into one of the first Babi families of Isfahan, and she lives a life of quiet contemplation and prayer. Agha Sayyid Mehdi is visiting Isfahan at the request of Baha'u'llah to promulgate the teachings of the faith. At a gathering of believers one evening, the aunt of Fatimeh Khanum, Abdu'l-Bahā's future wife, asks if Agha Sayyid Mehdi has heard anything about a bride for the saintly, handsome, 29-year-old Abdu'l-Bahá. In response, Agha Sayyid Mehdi tells them a dream that Baha'u'llah had recounted for him in Akká as he was pacing the outer rooms of the house. Agha Sayyid Mehdi, last night I had a strange dream. I dreamt that the face of the beautiful girl in Tehran, whose hand in marriage we have asked from our brother Mirza Hassan for the most great branch, gradually became darkened and indistinct. At the same time, another girl appeared with a luminous face and a luminous heart. I have chosen her for the most great branch. Now, Fatimeh Khanum's aunt, who poses this question to Agha Sayyid Mehdi, is an illustrious Babi. She is eloquent and she is ardent, and she was Tahireh's companion when Tahireh was in Iraq. She is better known as, her name is Khurshid Bagum, but she's better known as Shamsud Duha, the morning sun. She is the mother-in-law to Mirza Muhammad Hassan, who is better known as Sultanush Shuhada, the king of the martyrs. The king and the beloved of martyrs were very famous saintly martyrs. And so she is not nobody. She's very spiritual and she has a wonderful instinct. And she is so illustrious, in fact, that in 1915, when recalling the biographies of eminent believers in Memorials of the Faithful, Abdu'l-Bahá will dedicate a chapter to Shamsud Duha. So when Shamsud Duha hears of this dream of Baha'u'llah, there is zero doubt in her mind that the radiant girl in Baha'u'llah's dream that replaced the darkened face of the girl in Tehran is her niece, Fatimeh Khanum. So she returns home and she tells Fatimeh Khanum. She tells Fatimeh Khanum, I swear by the one true God, at the moment when Agha Sayyid Mehdi told this story, I felt without a shadow of a doubt, you are that girl, you will see. Her aunt's statement distresses Fatimeh Khanum greatly. She dismisses the idea vehemently and tearfully replies to Shamsud Duha, may God forgive me, how can I be worthy? I beg you not to say this again and not to mention it to anyone. But. 1871, 1872, the invitation from Baha'u'llah. Shortly after this event, Baha'u'llah sends his trusted courier, Sheikh Salman, and sends him to Isfahan with a very special mission. He is to take Fatimeh Khanum and her brother and bring them for pilgrimage in Akká via pilgrimage in Mecca and Medina. And the pilgrimage for Akká is just a stratagem because really she's coming to Akká to marry Abdu'l-Bahá. But every step of the journey is minutely organized and orchestrated by Baha'u'llah. He tells them exactly where to go, what boat to take, what time to take it, how long to stay in Mecca and Medina, when to leave the boat, when they arrive in Akká, and they follow the instructions to the letter. Instructions await them in every city that they reach. They leave Isfahan for Bushir, they sail to Jeddah, the port for Mecca and Medina. Then they go to Mecca, they perform the rites of pilgrimage. Then they go back to Jeddah, where they sail for Alexandria with instructions to proceed directly to Akká. When they finally arrive in Akká in the dead of night, Abdu'l-Bahá has been sent by Baha'u'llah to ensure her safe arrival. And Abdu'l-Bahá watches in the dark from the quay. But she does not know this until after her marriage, when the greatest holy Leaf tells her. The morning after her arrival, the women of the Holy Family bring Munirih Khanum into the presence of Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah's very first words to Munirih Khanum are momentous. He says, "We have received you in this prison at a time when the prison door is closed to all the believers, so that the power of God may become clear and evident to all." 1872, 1873, the gift of a new name. This is Munirih Khanum, the wife of Abdu'l-Bahá, for half a century. This photograph was taken in the 1870s. She was married in 1873. So it was taken shortly after her marriage. How amazing is that? Munirih Khanum, when she arrives in Akká, lives in the house of Mirza Musa for 5 months while the preparations are being made for her marriage to Abdu'l-Bahá. There is an issue of space for the young couple that must be resolved before the wedding takes place. During this time, Munirih Khanum has the honor of attaining Baha'u'llah's presence several times. She also receives kind messages from Baha'u'llah through Mirza Musa, and sometimes a gift. One day, Mirza Musa returns from his visit to Baha'u'llah with something extraordinary. He tells Munirih Khanum, "I have brought you a wonderful gift. You have been renamed Munirih, luminous, by Baha'u'llah." Munirih Khanum immediately remembers the girl from Baha'u'llah's dream. Her aunt convinced her was her, the girl with the luminous face. Her new name is Munirih, meaning luminous. 1872, 1873, portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá as a young man. This is such a beautiful vignette. I decided to put a modern color photograph of the Mediterranean Sea outside of Akká, where Abdu'l-Bahá swims in this vignette. Okay. During her stay in Mirza Musa's home, Munirih Khanum often stands at the door and watches Abdu'l-Bahá, and she called him a strong and graceful swimmer. Swim in the Mediterranean Sea. In her recollections to Lady Blumfield, Munirih Khanum brushes a delightful portrait of Abdu'l-Bahá as a young man. These are the words of Munirih Khanum. You should have known him. You have known him in his later years, but then in the youth of his beauty and manly vigor, with his unfailing love, his kindness, his cheerfulness, his sense of humor, his untiring considerations for everybody, he was marvelous, without equal, surely, in the whole earth. I made a mistake by 2 centuries. 8th of March, 1873, a blessing from Baha'u'llah. This is the courtyard of the house of Abud, where Ilyas Abud still lived at the time of the wedding of Abdu'l-Bahá and Munirih Khanum. This staircase leads to the upper floor, where Ilyas Abud is going to have a room furnished and the wall broken down to open into the house of Udi Khamar as his wedding gift to for Abdu'l-Bahá, offered to Baha'u'llah. Ilyas Abud, the owner of the two houses, starts to inquire as to what could possibly be delaying this wedding. He does not get an answer to his questions. Obviously, the question of a bedroom for the young couple, the Holy Family would be so modest, they would never speak these words. So on his own, he realizes, where are they going to live? A house of Udi Khamar is tiny. So he realizes the couple has no place to live. They can't get married until they do. And so he's the only one who can do something about this. And he opens up a room in his own house, the house of Abud, Ilyas Abud. He breaks down a wall and connects it to the house of Udi Khamar. So opens a door in the wall and has it beautifully decorated. And then he presents this room as a gift to Baha'u'llah, saying, I have prepared this room for the master. Baha'u'llah accepts Ilyas Abud's gift, and the wedding is performed that day, 3 hours after sunset, around 8 p.m. on March 1873, and Baha'u'llah offers Munirih Khanum the best wedding gift in the entire world. He gives her a blessing. You have come. You are welcome. O my leaf and my handmaiden, verily we chose thee and accepted thee to serve my most great branch. And this is by my grace, which is not equaled by all the treasures of the earth and heaven. How many were the girls in Baghdad and Adrianople, and in this most great prison, who hoped to attain to this bounty and whose hopes were not fulfilled. You must be thankful for this most great bestowal and great favor. When you listen to this blessing, you really get the sense of a manifestation of God, offering his most precious treasure to this befitting bride. It is an extraordinary passage. And finally, 8th of March, 1873, the wedding of Munirih Khanum and Abdu'l-Bahá. And a color picture to express our joy at this event. The greatest holy leaf gives Munirih Khanum a white dress to wear. There are only 7 guests, all family and the wife and daughters of Ilyas Abud, the neighbor who gave them such an amazing wedding gift. And no cake, but tea. Munirih Khanum composed a poem about her wedding later. The 7th night of the fasting month became the date of this delight. Rise up to your feet, O friends, for the most great dawn has arrived. Munirih Khanum is the only woman in the entire Holy Family to have written her own autobiography. She was a talented writer. Speaking to Lady Blumfield decades later, Munirih Khanum brushes a portrait of her wedding and her marriage. Oh, the spiritual happiness that enfolded us. It cannot be described by earthly words. The chanting ended, the guests left us, and I was the wife of my beloved. How wonderful, how noble he was in his beauty. I adored him. I recognized his greatness and thanked God for bringing me to him. It is impossible to put into words the delight of being with the master. I seemed to be in a glorious realm of sacred happiness while in his company. Now, I'm breaking my ironclad rule of chronology because I wanted to stay with this love story when I was writing it, and I wanted to go to the end of it. So I'm going to tell you about tablets from Abdu'l-Bahá to his beloved wife. I love stories. Munirih Khanum, who will lose 5 children to the poisonous climate of Akká, causing her immense heartbreak. Baha'u'llah will address several tablets to her, and in some of these tablets, Baha'u'llah offers her comfort for her loss and speaks in detail about her children living in the Abha kingdom. So she is comforted by a manifestation of God. Excerpts of some of Abdu'l-Bahā's tablets to Munirih Khanum are available in the one-of-a-kind, extraordinary book of Baha'i history, Leaves from the Twin Divine Trees by Bahá'í Ruhani Ma'ani. In these excerpts, you see Abdu'l-Bahá as a brother, as a doting father, as an empathic son. You see Abdu'l-Bahá worried as a dad, so kind and so respectful as a husband in the way he addresses Munirih Khanum. His letters are filled with concern for others, minimizing anything that might be happening with him. He inquires about various members of the household, always inquires about his saintly mother and Baha'u'llah, and expresses so much love and concern and devotion for his father, his children, his wife, his mother. Here are 2 excerpts. So Bahá'í Ruhani Ma'ani estimates that this particular tablet, in response to a letter received while he was staying in Haifa, was written before 1886, because Nawab is still alive, and Nawab died in 1886. These are the words of Abdu'l-Bahá. He is God, O handmaid of God. He's writing to his wife. All that was written hath become known and been understood. Praise be God, through the bounty and grace of the beloved of the world, physical wellness is attained in every respect. The weather in Haifa is not bad, and there is no trouble, except that the mufti is bothersome. However, he is leaving today or tomorrow. On behalf of this servant, make the dust beneath the blessed feet the coal of the true sight. Convey my utmost eagerness to Her Highness the Mother and Her Highness the Sister, and write in detail about the children. This following tablet, written between 1886 and 1892, according to Bahá'í Ma'ani, because Abdu'l-Bahá was away from home in Beirut or somewhere else, and he is responding to a letter from Munirih Khanum and expressing his concern for the heat in Akká that would be too uncomfortable for Baha'u'llah should he leave for Bahji to visit the house of Abud. Here is God. He is God. Thy perspicuous letter has arrived. Whatsoever thou didst write hath become known, and all that was concealed in the innermost parts of the sentences became manifest. You can't hide anything. The return of the blessed countenance caused utmost anxiety and concern. What will happen to his blessed body during the intense heat in that narrow house? Undoubtedly, he would be very much affected by it. Were it during the winter, it would have been easier. But in the summer, in an inadequate place, and in the most great prison, I swear by the ancient beauty that if tears of blood were shed and hearts consumed, it would not suffice. And this is all from the greatness of his ancient endurance. Regarding my noble sister, I long for her presence with all my soul, my heart, my spirit, and my inner being. Day and night she is remembered in mine inmost thoughts and feelings. I can say nothing concerning my separation from her, for whatever I write, my tears will certainly wash it away. Zia Khanum, Ruha, and Tuba, and all 3 daughters of his, and all members of the household, and the family of Sultanush Shuhada, the aunt of Munirih Khanum, and the members of that household, as well as other handmaids of God, were all in my thoughts, and I am engaged in remembering them. Be certain and never doubt it. Since I have written in detail to Khadim regarding my return, I did not repeat the same in this letter. Take Hussein Effendi to the Holy Court and let him, on my behalf, prostrate himself at the blessed threshold. My physical health, praise be God, is good. This is 2 tablets. That book, Leaves of the Twin Divine Trees, has hundreds of excerpts like this. It's so intimate, so beautiful. Now, this is an extraordinary photograph. These are the women of the Holy Family. The next section is quite momentous. So I'm going to stop here for today, and I'm going to tell you who are the members of the Holy Family, but I have one question first. If I move my mouse over here, do you see it? Can you nod? If you see my mouse over here, you don't see it. Okay, you see it now? Okay, good. All right, but it's important if you see it. So in this photograph I'm gonna show you this like this. I'm gonna extend the description so you can see the description right here. And I'm going to, because it's kind of important for you to read at the same time, because otherwise it's going to be kind of confusing. So there you go. This is a photograph of the women of the Holy Family. In this photograph are Abdu'l-Bahá's sister, Bahá'í Khanum, the greatest holy leaf, 2 years younger than Abdu'l-Bahá and born in 1846. And she is in the middle of the picture, all dressed in dark with a little handkerchief tied under her chin. This is the greatest holy leaf, Abdu'l-Bahá's sister. She's 2 years younger than Abdu'l-Bahá. Here is the wife of Abdu'l-Bahá for 50 years, Munirih Khanum, born in 1847, 1 year after the greatest holy leaf and 3 years after Abdu'l-Bahá. And these are Abdu'l-Bahá's 4 surviving children, all girls. And from left to right, we have here Munirih Khanum, their last daughter, their youngest daughter. Tuba Khanum is seated right next to her. She is their second daughter. This is Bahá'í Khanum, the greatest holy leaf. This is Munirih Khanum, the wife of Abdu'l-Bahá and the mother of these 4 girls. Here we have Zia Khanum, their first daughter, their eldest daughter, the mother of Shoghi Effendi. She married a relative of the Bab, and in doing so, Shoghi Effendi became a descendant of both the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the priceless pearl from the twin surging seas. And the last daughter of Baha'u'llah is Ruha Khanum. She is their 3rd daughter. So Munirih Khanum, youngest daughter, Tuba Khanum, 2nd daughter, the greatest holy leaf, Munirih Khanum, Zia Khanum, the 1st daughter, their eldest daughter, and Ruha Khanum, their 3rd daughter. And this photograph, you can download it and you can copy and paste the description and you can study it. And tomorrow we will move to the house of Abud. I want to thank everyone for being here. I am so happy. This is day 3 of storytelling, The Extraordinary Life of Abdu'l-Bahá. Tomorrow will be day 4. If you are not receiving daily emails with the Zoom link and with the YouTube video for the day, you can send me an email at violettaz@gmail.com, and I will include you in the daily emails with the daily YouTube video and the playlist. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the Clearwater Bahá'ís for making this space available to us and sponsoring us. Thank you to Firm Foundation Academy for having organized this in the first place, and the genius Peter Terry for having come up with this idea of storytelling the chronologies. Thank you, Peter. And thank you to Desert Rose Baha'i Institute for your sponsorship. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you in the discussion. And to everyone on YouTube, see you tomorrow.